With Temtem's 6th and final island having arrived as of the latest 0.8 update dubbed the Arbury Island update, both the game's main story and Tempedia are now complete, with the post-game content still being left before Temtem makes its full 1.0 launch, which will presumably bring the game to Nintendo Switch and Xbox Series X as well. That said, if you've been on this channel for a while, then you know that we've made a review for every main update, the early access itself, and this will be the final patch review, if you will, before the final product is released sometime next year. That said, this review will be focused on Arbury specifically and will contain some mild spoilers. Anyways, within this guide, we will cover 3 main factors that I believe are important as a monster taming fan, especially with an RPG type game. These being the story and lore, the gameplay, in this case as it pertains to Arbury, and the new Temtem themselves. That said, make sure to sit back, relax, and let's dive right in. Okay, so obviously when it comes to story and the overall lore, I don't want to spoil too much about the major plot points since it is the last island, and as of such, the island story does in fact tie up a lot of loose ends. However, we will discuss these plot points in more vague terms to avoid any major spoilers. That said, the Arbury Island update acts as the climax of the Temtem story with the final confrontation with Bisloba. The update will take you to the 2 final dojos and have you fight against their leaders as well, and as far as dojo leaders go, I unfortunately did not find these 2 to be as memorable as the previous ones, which may very well be a symptom of the fact that they're so close to the end game and hence are overshadowed. But honestly, looking back on it, my takeaway was that the melee leader is sort of just a dummy, and the mental leader is also a dummy, but he has the capability of utilizing language in a pompous way. They weren't bad characters by any means, they just didn't stand out to me personally. Speaking of dojo leaders though, the entire archipelago challenge at this point seems a little bit off in my opinion. What I mean is, for example, in Pokemon, each gym leader will give you a badge, which allows you to compete in the league against the Elite Four and eventually the champion. Temtem's dojo leaders, at least at this point in the game, don't really seem to function that way and seem to just be roadblocks for the sake of being roadblocks. So what I mean is the game ends off with a clash against Bisloba rather than like a league challenge or some equivalent, which is fine, but it does beg the question, what was the point in the dojo challenge? We have the Arc Tamers, which are sort of like the game's equivalent to the Elite Four, but function kind of like the Wizard Saints from OG Fairy Tale, where they're just these jack tamers who sort of oversee the land, but they're not affiliated with government or anything like that. They just sort of pop up when something bad's happening. But there just didn't feel like there was this sort of culmination of defeating all the dojo masters and having it all tie up. Now that said, there could be some sort of challenge that makes use of the dojo wins on the 7th mini island, but up to this point, there hasn't really been any mention of it, and it makes me wonder, why do people in this world even go up against the dojo leaders in the first place? Is it just to test their strength, or is there something bigger involved? Anyway, the climax of the Bisloba chapter did also feel a little bit off in my opinion. Without spoiling too much, the big leader reveal felt like it just happened, and there is another situation that takes place that I really don't want to spoil, but let me just say, someone just shows up with absolutely no explanation, and that's that. Again, I'm sorry if this is kind of vague, but anyone who watched our stream or played the update themselves will know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyways, regarding the Arbury story in particular, I definitely don't think it was as strong as some of the other stories. It wasn't bad, but also didn't leave me feeling super satisfied either. I'd say the story was middling in the sense that it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. Okay, so on to the gameplay. With this being a patch-specific review, we will be focusing on what Arbury brings to the table. Now, this update brought forth some new items and mechanics, most notably the Coward's Blanket, which acts like an experience all and also gives TVs to all your Temtem. Great addition, though it is only available in the post-game, so it's more of an endgame item. The update also brought forth a ton of new techniques, gears, items, and of course Temtem, and while a lot of these I'd consider more situated for the endgame and PvP, they've definitely added the right kind of items in my opinion. We've got an item that doubles XP growth for a short time, an item that will show if a Temtem has good SVs or not, and stuff like that. So if you're into the comp scene, I do think that this update is going to be something you'll enjoy quite nicely. As for the average, more casual player, let's talk about what Arbury itself has to offer. So this island is essentially the amalgamation of everything thus far, so there isn't any new transport method like with the previous islands, though mounts are coming with the next update. The dojos and dojo puzzles are definitely unique as well, especially this. Whoever designed this dojo is absolutely evil and should definitely consider ruling the underworld. I think they'd make a great leader. Anyways, the game's level progression feels really good actually. I think Temtem did a really great job at not allowing the player to get over leveled whilst also not making the enemies over leveled or too hard either. The game's difficulty is not hard but not easy. I mentioned this in a previous video, but you can't spam your strongest move and win. There's a lot of strategy involved and you've got to build your team accordingly. Now, while I say progression is good, I will say that there are too many unskippable tamer battles. Like every 5 seconds, there's a tamer that you can't skip. I definitely see this inflating player time, and while I'm totally fine with there being a lot of battles, I do think that there should be a few more that should be skippable. I do understand that having more skippable battles may render the player underleveled, but I also think that players should have the ability to make that choice and either use strategy to defeat higher level tamers or just get punished accordingly for skipping. Another issue I see becoming more apparent as each update is brought forth is the way evolution works. Basically, evolution requires a certain amount of level ups. So if you catch a Tem at level 5 and it needs, let's say, 10 level ups to evolve, it'll evolve at 15 instead of it always evolving at the same level regardless. Now this feels kind of cool because it makes you actually have to use certain first forms that in the later game you'd end up evolving after like 1 level. The issue that arises, however, is that a lot of these endgame Temtems need a lot of level up. Like, imagine catching a Rhyhorn in Victory Road and then having to level it up 30 times to evolve it. It's not the best situation. Now, yes, you could go back and breed, but I'd argue that this is very sequence breaking, or you can use an item called a mini monolith, which will insta-evolve it for you, but this just adds an extra layer of unrewarded nuance in my opinion. I actually initially really liked this system, but with each update, it definitely feels more like an inconvenience. Now, I know that there is a lot of critique here, but Temtem has a lot going for it that isn't specific to this patch. We can teleport now, the battles are RNG free, which is definitely nice. The game runs smoothly on my 1050 Ti, the battle animations are clean, and it has a lot going for it in the competitive scene. So while I do have critiques on the gameplay side of things, I'd say overall it's quite enjoyable. Alright, so let's finally talk about the new Temtem that we've received as of this update. This is where Arbury really shines in my opinion, as it's brought forth another really interesting, diverse pool of new Temtem, and the overall 164 Temtem available are very unique, and there are a ton of interesting hybrid type combinations available. For instance, check out Garunder, this toxic and electric alligator boy, or Mammoth, this earth and fire mammoth Temtem. A lot of new Temtems that they've added appear despite them not necessarily lining up with the island's specific themes, and I'm glad they did that. We also, of course, got a wide array of new mental and melee type Temtems to coincide with Arbury, a few cool mental types being the mental fire type Ahoy, the mental electric Minotaur, and the mono mental type Midi, while some really cool melee types include the melee and nature type Broccolum, the new Tawai evolution being Tutsu, and the digital melee type Monko. We've even received some really cool split evolutions, including a counterpart and pre-evolution to Barnshi, and the Venx line, which looks really cool. All in all, I've got to say the diverse cast of new Temtem look really good, and it really rounds the Tempedi out nicely. Now, it's important to note that one more Temtem will be coming in the future, but other than that, this does seem to be the entire roster moving forward. If you want to see every Temtem that currently exists, definitely check out this video, which I will leave linked below. So yeah, guys, all in all, I found the update to be quite fun. Music was great, story was a bit middling, but still serviceable. Gameplay was what you'd come to expect if you've played previous updates, and the roster is extremely solid in my opinion. So should you buy Temtem now? I think now's the best time to grab the game. It's still slightly discounted because of the early access nature of it, and it's got the entire story and a ton of side quests that are already bundled within it. The only thing really missing is a post-game. I do have a lot more to say about the game's other features, like its multiplayer aspects, and I definitely like to go more spoiler heavy in the future, but for this Arbury specific review, I think we've covered the major points that I wanted to talk about. At full launch, we'll definitely go more into the general aspects of the game, ranging from the first 6 islands content to the post-game island. So if you want to get notified when that video does come out, definitely subscribe to the channel. Also might be a good idea to subscribe because as soon as we get information on its release date and confirmation for Nintendo Switch and Xbox, I will be notifying you guys. Anyways, with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Special thanks to all my patrons, especially Jim Hamilton and StealCase. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.